Welcome back to Ether Hour, everybody. I am your host, Conrad Franz, joined as always by Dmitry Kalyagin. This is our ninth episode. We're coming at you with a big subject talking about Orthodoxy in East Asia, China, Japan, that part of the world. And we are, of course, joined by a guest, a friend of mine who will introduce himself in 1 second. But Dmitry, how are you doing?
Doing great, Conrad. It's great to be here on the ninth episode of Aether. Already 9 episodes in, and we're going to speak about a region which I think has fascinated a lot of people in regards to its history in terms of Christianity and the Christian tradition there. I think it definitely is the land of the future in regards to Orthodox Christianity, and we're kind of touching upon it in this first episode, but I'm sure this could be a series in the future. And joined today by our good friend Conrad. I'll let you introduce him, but as always, I'm glad to be here and looking forward to this really exciting episode.
And you're coming off a trip, which I'm sure we'll discuss, to some relevant regions, but who is here with me, a good friend of mine, Seraphim. I'll let him introduce himself, give a bit of his background. How are you doing?
Hey, yeah, I'm doing well. So my name's Seraphim, as both of them just said. I'm a Orthodox Christian. I was baptized in 2020, right before the pandemic, and a little before Conrad. Me and Conrad met in the same church. We're catechized together before the whole pandemic happened. And I'm Chinese, so they kind of invited me on for this very topic. It's kind of involved on a low level with Orthodox OCMC, Orthodoxy in China. I forget the full name. It's like Orthodox Fellowship All Saints of China or something like that. A lot of them are based in, a lot of the folks that are in America are based in the Northeast. Been doing a lot of Byzantine Chant in Chinese. That's been a big project these past few months, pretty much since Christmas or so. But yeah, I speak a little bit of Mandarin, more or less fluent in Cantonese. And yeah, I'm really trying my best to try to integrate these sort of many identities as best I can within the context of the church. And I think ultimately it'll be, for the glory of God and evangelizing, if not full on, going to China, definitely giving my time and my energy towards publishing content, whether that's literature, religious texts, or chants for the missionary work in China.
No, I think that's Byzantine Chant in Chinese. All of that is going to be, I struggle with it in English, so I can't imagine how some of, the attempting goes. And that's really awesome. But we're going to be talking on here about history of Orthodoxy in China, then kind of moving up in time towards the current day. And for those of you who listen to World War now, China, Russia, that relationship is really big in the geopolitical sphere right now. And because of that, we've seen some interesting meetings, Patriarch Kirill meeting with Xi Jinping, and, just kind of this future of Orthodoxy in China and these regions is kind of being focused on a little bit more because of this geopolitical situation. But before we get into anything like that, we got to go way back in time to the days of the apostles. So, Dmitry, who was the first Christian in China or in the region?
Well, according to, I suppose, popular legend, and it isn't in fact mentioned in the hagiography of Apostle Thomas, which I suppose is the apostle who allegedly traveled to China, or at least has entered into some of the regions of ancient China in the 1st century AD, after his quite thorough, I suppose, evangelization of India, where he eventually met his martyrdom, as according to mainstream sort of Christian belief. And in the Orthodox Christian Church, we do take this account as sort of the gospel narrative and the continuation of the New Testament story, that Apostle Thomas did in fact meet his martyrdom in India. But according to legend, he did in fact travel to China, and similar to how Apostle Andrew the First, called the brother of Apostle Peter, did travel to Crimea and did spend time in what is today known as Ukraine, or I guess ancient Russia, and did baptize some Scythian peoples. That is the legend that is attributed to in Eastern Europe. So is Apostle Thomas, I suppose, counted as the apostle of China in a way. So the first roots of Christianity, at least, do kind of hinge upon his mission in China. Whether or not he established any bishops or sees or churches or parishes in China is unknown, because at least none of them have survived to this day. And in fact, it is kind of a matter, it's more of an archaeological matter at this point, which we will discuss later on, exactly how Christianity did continue on in China and which other missions had accompanied, the various Christian pilgrims and missionaries from the west all the way to the east. And by west, we mean in this case the Middle East, and all these various travelers who traveled to the eastern regions of the world, and in fact have met with several challenges throughout the centuries, kind of spreading Christianity in this particular region. So definitely, Apostle Thomas is considered the apostle of China, and in fact, in the future, as I believe, there probably will be more churches dedicated to him. There'll be more of a clear image, just as in Constantinople at some point, the ancient capital of the Byzantine Empire, it really wasn't clear exactly as to who should be the symbol of the new church, because Constantinople wasn't considered an apostolic see until a little bit later on. And so they were in fact a bit undecided as to should Apostle Andrew the First called, or should Apostle John, who passed away at Ephesus, really quite close by to Byzantium and Constantinople, who should be considered the apostle of the Second Rome. It was very much a debate until a bit later on. And in fact, some of these narratives will probably be dealt with a bit in the future. And as Christian archaeology develops furthermore into, I suppose, the 21st and the 22nd century in the future. So I guess we'll investigate more, speak about more on that subject later on. But at this point, let's move on to, I suppose, the first millennia AD, when we have the first roots of Christianity really take hold in a palpable way in China. Perhaps, Seraphim, you could expand upon that, especially some of the early Church of the East, migrations into China and the pilgrimages, and maybe even outright missionary work that has occurred on that end.
Yeah, so I actually did a bit of research into kind of those claims about first couple century sort of entryways of Christianity into China. A lot of those claims, especially regarding Apostle Thomas making his way into China, are a little bit speculative, in my opinion. Obviously, whenever you do archaeological work, it's always a form of interpretation of the past. Like, there's so many. Jonathan Bajot often makes like the funny claim about like those for so-called fertility goddess like statues that they have in Mesopotamia. It's like, how do you know they're fertility goddess and they're worshipped? There's no way to really connect those dots. So one of the things that I was looking into was pretty much all the claims about Apostle Thomas going into China are based on this one author called Pierre Perrier, like very French, like Pierre. And he's looking mainly at this mountain called Kongwangshan, and the book is called Kongwangshan, Apostle Thomas and Prince Ying, the Evangelization of China from 64 AD to 87 AD. And a lot of these really old statues and carvings in the wall, he's seeing basically Christian symbology, iconography. There's a pretty convincing Kai Rho symbol in one of the images that are taken, but then interpreting some of these, for example, like statues as Mary holding a baby. I mean, a woman holding a baby is automatically assumed to be iconography of the Theotokos and the Christ child. It could be possible, but it's very hard to tell. I don't think there are many inscriptions, Chinese characters. So a lot of that is based off of one book and one person's, let's say, archaeological expertise or speculation. So I'm not sure how much stake we can put in that. I'm not sure. Did you guys do much research into that?
No, I would say, in fact, the one book I really looked at was written by Russian missionaries in China in the 19th century, and they only make a passing remark, and probably they also have read this Frenchman's book, and they kind of make a passing remark that maybe Apostle Thomas could have had some dealings with early Chinese Christianity in the early centuries, but in fact they don't actually go into depth, and it's very much a non-speculative work, and it's somewhat archaeological in its very nature. It's very historical work. It's called the ancient remnants of Christianity according to Chinese sources, and it's written by Archimandrite Palladium, who was the who was the head of the Russian mission in the 1870s in China. So he was kind of like of a more historian, sort of archaeological mindset, and so he decided to write this 400-page book, a few chapters which I've skimmed over just in sort of in search of, I guess, what are some of the exemplary remarks he would make. But he was very much looking at different sources, and it was very heavily focused on, at least in the historian side, which we can, I guess, go into depth here. And he does mention a lot of that in the first millennium Chinese history. But really, Apostle Thomas, not really here. The Russians at least haven't found any evidence in the 19th century. Yeah.
I guess insofar as from an epistemic perspective in the tradition, if we do hold, that his martyrdom was in India and what was that, obviously I think a lot of the Malankara Monophysite churches would hold to, him going out there, and I think a lot of us would. I think from a geographic perspective, in theory, it's thus makes it possible that he wandered up a little bit farther north or something into what is now considered, the state of China today, which, has historically covered a very large amount of, East Asia. So in defense, I guess, of the tradition maximalists, I'll say I'm willing to deem it definitely geographically possible based on accepted tradition.
Yeah, I think it's definitely possible, and I could, in terms of universal history, I could definitely see it as being a more concrete piece of evidence for Chinese to say, Buddhism actually entered China pretty late. If we take Christianity to have entered China in first century, it entered somewhere in the third century, the third or fourth century. But Christianity, if it really did predate Buddhism, then you could even say it's more native to China than Buddhism is. Yeah, so what I would call is the more established history of Christianity in China is with the Church of the East. I'm not 100% sure if it was Indian missionaries or Syriac or Iranian missionaries from that part of the world. But either way, it definitely was the Church of the East. As to whether or not they were heretical, there was a thread by, I think, Sieran. Is that his name, Conrad? Yeah, Sieran was basically saying there might have been divisions within the Church of the East where there was a heretical faction and a more Orthodox faction. I can't really speak to it. I did take a look at the primary documents of what was called the Xi'an Stele.
That is going to be it for the free preview, everybody. Be sure to go to worldwarnow.substack.com and subscribe. Go paid to hear the full episode. We go really deep on Japan, China, Korea, the prospects of Orthodoxy, Patriarch Kirill meeting with Xi Jinping, and so on. So you don't want to miss that. Be sure to go on Substack, subscribe to the paid, just $7 a month, as well as there's a free trial. $75 a year saves you a few dollars as well if you want to do that. Really helps us out. Remember, we have 33 plus episodes of World War Now up for free, so all of your support really means a lot and lets us do more content. Thank you to Seraphim, and go subscribe. Yeah, thank you so much. God bless y'all.